Go ahead and get started. So I think everyone knows this session was really prompted because of just a blog or an article or whatever you want to call it in on LinkedIn. I just thought it would be neat to do a training, so I offered it up. But then I realized, oh man, this is quite a bit of work because I had to condense so much material. So I hope you guys find it useful. I did take a survey, so I tried my best to target the training so it would be useful. So let's get rolling. All right. So this is who we are, just as a group. I have a company called Mufasa, and we're really just independent cybersecurity team. We love building software. We got expertise in C. Mohit, he's actually our director of cybersecurity engineering, C Sharp, cybersecurity engineering. And then the other side is we like regulations. And then the other thing is we're actually part of this something called the Dell's Founder 50 Club. That's something we're very, very proud of. And yes, David, sure. I can give you a little bit of my background. So I started this company about 2 years ago. Now, before that, most of my experience is from Department of Defense. I was a cybersecurity professional as a contractor, then also as a military guy. I was working in the security field. I was enlisted. I did quite a bit of work with certification and accreditation, all of these funky acronyms that you see. Worked with defense with when it was called DITSCAP. Worked in DSKIDS 3.6, which is a special access community. And I'll talk about exactly what they mean. And then I got into software assurance. And what software assurance means is what everybody calls AppSec or application security. But things like threat modeling, source code analysis, dynamic testing, that sort of thing. So two things that I'm really passionate about is software and writing good software and cybersecurity regulations. So when I'm bored, I'll either read the Federal Register or I'll work on software with Mohit to build something. It's a weird mix, but I really love what I do. I live in Ohio. I travel quite often to Texas as well as California. Have customers out there, and I got two beautiful little daughters, and I have a wife, and we live here in Ohio. Of course, you can see my credentials. I'm sure everybody went to my LinkedIn profile, but that's just a little bit about me. If you have any questions, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I've already been communicating with several folks that are in this webinar. Just email me, call me, or just shoot me a tweet. I'm pretty active on all those channels. So it's a little bit about me. So I want to cover this. I talked to my legal counsel. He thought it would be a good idea to display this, but I think everybody knows this, right? We're going to be talking about legal concepts and how they apply to information assurance, information security, but don't substitute this as a legal advice. You should always talk to your legal advisor, a professional legal advisor, or if you're on base, what do they have? A JAG, right? So you should talk to the base officials on these matters if there are questions. And as we know, standards change, right? NIST is already working on revision 5. So there may be some omissions and inaccuracies. I'm presenting this from a different perspective. So I think you'll like it, but this does not constitute as legal advice. So I want to go over some survey results because I thought that was pretty cool. Thank you for everyone who actually took those survey. Jay, you cannot hear me. Can everybody else hear me? Am I coming across loud and clear? I want to make sure. Okay. All right. We will keep rolling. Okay. So nobody selected just because my CISO told me to, and I was happy to see that because I think one of my friends did just as a joke. So that told me everybody is genuinely interested in learning this material and knowing more about it. A couple of other guys mentioned we want to understand what is, how can we leverage NIST for HIPAA and for other regulations. So what I did last night, I reworked the material a little bit and added that content in there to go through it. Some people wanted to understand what is the difference between commercial. Are they even doing anything? And we'll talk about what that means when I say commercial. It's just not FEDRAMP. So another person wanted to understand prioritization of control. So after you have your baseline, which again, I'll talk about what all that means. After you have your workload, how do you prioritize that workload? Is there some sort of risk matrix we can use? What can we use to say, all right, we really need to work on access control before we do program management? So we'll go over that. So somebody asked about templates, and I don't have any templates. I don't use any templates, and I'll tell you why. There are no templates that are 100% approved for NIST for every single community. So if you work in special access community, there's a guidance out there called the JSIG, JSIG. I'm not sure what it stands for. I actually forgot. However, it's not a public document that's available. They have templates inside of there, and those are approved templates for that community only. If you're working on your FedRAMP certification, the templates are located out here. And then if you're working in the defense, like the Air Force, you are right now going through a transition, moving from something called DICAP control set to risk management NIST control set. And what a lot of people are doing in that world, they're not using 100% NIST templates. So what you want to do is you want to go back, look at your DICAP templates, and either modify those and work with your SCA, your security control assessor, which used to be called the CAR, and make sure you get an approval before you start working on those templates. Because you could go through all this work, because NIST templates are actually totally different than the old method. You could go through all this work, and really at the end of the day, the authorization official may say, well, this is not how we want to see this information. So double check that, but a good baseline templates are available on this website on FedRAMP, and you can modify those easily for any sort of NIST-based certification accreditation effort. All right, wanted to cover some general items. If you guys have questions, just type them on the chat window. I have to switch back and forth, but that's okay. I got one of my colleagues, David Dickmeyer. He said if I miss anything, he'll text me. Or you can post it to LinkedIn, the chat that we started. Just say, hey, Max, you didn't cover this, and I'll try to go back and answer those questions in that format. The other thing is this is actually a condensed version of a very long training. Normally, if you type in, I want to go to RMF training, it's about 4 days. That's what we offer. My intent is to provide this training to you for free, and really to help out the community. I'm going to make everything available, and then you have my permission to reuse any of this content in your own training. The one thing I do want to cover is that there are standards, right? Like the NIST is the standard, but then there's reality. So I'm going to cover what really happens, and then we'll talk about what the standard says. So that's the difference. If you go to formal training, we have to teach you what the standard says, and that's it, and not really get into the reality. But on this session, we can get into a little bit of both, which is good. So I went out there, I looked at everybody's background, I kind of checked out what, who does what. And here are some of the assumptions I've made about everybody. we're not, this is not like a security plus training. You guys are, working professionals. You understand security strategies like defense in depth and all that stuff. So we're not going to go into that. These are the assumptions I've made, and I'm not going to talk about, what is a control set. And you should have basic familiarity with NIST RMF. But even if you don't, I got a pretty cool visualization that we've developed to just get you up to speed, like within 2 minutes. And I'm not going to go over mandates that drive these control sets, whether it's a DICAP control set or NIST control set. So everybody has heard of FISMA, Klinger-Cohen Act. So I'm not going to dive deeply into that. So that's the 4-hour content that I took out. It's very important stuff, but it's kind of boring. So I just thought, hey, let me just take it out for this group of people. Yes, Deborah, slides will be available. Actually, I'm going to post this to YouTube. So you'll have that, as well as if you want the slides, I'll send them out to everybody. So just shoot me an email afterwards. I'll send them out to you. But the YouTube video will be available for sure. So if you ever wanted to revisit it, it'll be available to go through the training. All right. Another assumption I made is, if we look at it, what does actually NIST say, right? There's 12 plus team members, chief security officer, risk executive function, and this is inside the DoD environment and the commercial environment as well, right? There's several roles, and a lot of times security guys and gals are wearing just several hats, right? This is what the standard says, but the reality is the work happens right here. Security control assessors, when they're looking at auditing your environment, and your ISSOs and ISSEs, your engineers and security officers, they will do bulk of the work for any given system. The other functions are making decisions about several systems. So they have their workload cut out, but your workload is cut out more for, after you select your baseline, now you actually got to create the documentation, make sure everybody's implementing it. So that's the reality of it. We're supposed to actually get more help, right? But that usually doesn't happen. Budget constraints. I've seen it where one ISSO is assigned up to 10 systems, and one security control assessor is assigned up to 20 systems. So that's a little bit of difference in, if you've never actually worked through this process, this is actually what happens. Acronyms. So I will try my best not to use any acronyms. I've already failed at this test. However, if I use an acronym and you have a question, just type it in. Hey, you said DICAP. What does that even mean? What does that stand for? And I'm sure somebody in the room, I've looked at everybody's background, there's many people that can answer these sorts of questions. So just as general, I want to set the stage. In the DoD, they still use a program called DICAP, DoD Information Certification Accreditation Program. We are now going through a transformation effort to transition to NIST Risk Management Framework. The DAA is now called, which was the approval authority, Defense Approval Authority, or Designated Approval Authority, is now called the Authorization Official. The CAR, Certification Authorization Representative, now is called the SCAR. Security Control Assessor Representative. And when I use these terms, IAO, Information Assurance Officer, Information Assurance Manager, ISSO, ISSE, there are distinct differences, but in general, I put them in one category, because normally these are the folks like us who are actually doing the control work. System security policy, system assessment plan. I think I messed that one up. Security assessment. So SSPs, SAP, SRs, I forget what they are too. I know what they are, but I forget the acronym. However, I'll try my best not to use those words. I'll just explain to you what we're actually supposed to be doing in those documents. So again, I apologize if I use them. Please type them out and other people will clarify. All right. So everybody has read the training objectives, so I won't go through them again. Um, However, I did wanted to say that most of our time we'll spend on these two items: categorization, and then how to, you should have a very clear understanding how to categorize systems through an impact assessment. And then last night, this just happened last night, I added the one bullet above and focused on it a little bit more. How do we use NIST to comply with HIPAA and other mandates out there, and how do we map it to other standards out there? So here's the outline. We'll go over NIST and then categorization process, and then we'll go over different methods, and then we'll just do a little bit of a summary and then end with the question and answers. So, of course, RMF stands for Risk Management Framework, but to me, what it is, it's a process that you begin where you have so much flexibility on how do you want to do the control selection. And that's why, although it's prescriptive, it's very confusing up front. Step one, what do we even do? And I believe the intent is that once you select what you're going to do, even if your workload is, let's say, 200 to 300 controls, but if you trim it down through different things, overlays and whatever else, non-applicability, down to 50 controls, it's so prescriptive that that you must still follow that control that you actually selected. So upfront, it's very flexible, and then it gets down deep into very prescriptive, like, are you auditing this, and how many? So you have to define frequencies. How many times are you doing this? Are you auditing this? Who is the person responsible for XYZ action? It's that prescriptive. And then, of course, it has an assessment process that your security control assessors follow. Authorization process, continuous monitoring that is still being defined by the Air Force. So it's a whole system that's developed, but the meat of it is in the controls itself. And the remainder of it, it's important, but where most people find value is in the controls. Who uses it? I put everyone. That's actually not true. However, in the future, I believe as cyber attacks continue to happen, we will get to more of a prescriptive standard. So there is a big push right now. Many people are seeking FEDRAMP certification. They want to do business with the government. They want to host government data. And of course, all of your state level systems, they have to comply with NIST as well. National security community, these guys were following other guidelines, such as JFAN, Defense Security Services guidelines. Now everybody is being rolled up underneath the NIST framework. So everybody's using it in the government. And then, of course, in the community, in the commercial side, if they want to do business with the government, they will have to do it. In fact, there was just a regulation released, I think, a year or two ago, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Standard, that took out some of the NIST controls and inserted them explicitly in there. I forgot what actually it's called, the actual number of the regulation, but I believe this is the framework of the future. All right, so this is the process overview. If you just type NIST RMF on Google, you'll find this. So just to show you where we are, we're in step one, and we're going to kind of cover step two. We're not going to go through what they call tailoring process. We're not going to do that, but we are going to select the controls. So this is where I inserted how do we use NIST to comply with other regulations. So I use this term interchangeably, regulation, framework, standard, but we must understand the difference, and this is not the webinar for it. So in general, regulation requires a lot of interpretation. And then in order to meet the intent of that regulation, you will have standards, you will have frameworks, and then you will have guidelines. So this is not accurate, but if we read the Sarbanes-Oxley section 404, normally it's used it's used in the publicly traded companies, and People use COSO framework, COBIT framework. You can also use ISO 27000. You can even use NIST if you wanted to. So as you get more to the right, you're starting to talk to the security, core security folks. More to the left, this is where you need to consult your legal counsel on how to interpret these regulations correctly. And then I put STIGs on there. These are very stringent, very prescriptive. I've applied STIGs to way back in the day, gold disc, right? It's system level changes like change your registry settings, or it could even be software level changes, as in you need to separate your data layer from your business logic, and you're going to do that through a data abstraction layer. So it's very, very prescriptive, and actually I like the STIGs. You learn quite a bit from them. But if you can manage this, the STIGs, those are normally mapped to a NIST control set or a DICAP control set. You can also map the STIG itself to PCI, to anything actually that you want. So that's really the how it works. NIST is you know, kind of, people either love it or they hate it. And normally commercial side people don't like it because it's so much work. So they'll opt for something like ISO 27000, which is kind of leaves you up to how to interpret that, how to apply the system level changes. HITRUST, it's a hodgepodge of framework. It takes in several regulations and it maps them to NIST and ISO, but it costs a lot of money. So I think most of this content you can get for free, so I pay for it. UCF, it's another unified compliance framework, costs a lot of money, I think. Again, most of this content is available for free, so I don't think you should pay for it. All right. So let's see. So with healthcare, so FISMA as to HIPAA and HITRUST is to RMF. Okay. Jay, can you clarify what question are you asking, just so I can go over it? I think I understand, but tell me if I'm wrong. So HIPAA is used primarily in the healthcare industry. However, that's not 100% accurate, because you could be hosting healthcare information inside of your data center. You could be hosting healthcare information inside of the government environment. So the industry that I have, it's an assumption. It's to say what it's for. So framework HITRUST, it was developed for the healthcare industry, but you can really use it for just about any environment. NIST, you know, heavily used by government environments, but not necessarily. We have folks that have libraries, that have federal information. So that's what I mean by industry. It's actually what it was designed for, what it's targeted for. So if you pick up HIPAA, you might, you know, consider using HITRUST because that's what it was designed for. However, if you are a publicly traded company and you have HIPAA, you might have to customize your framework. So that's what that industry tab is. I hope that answered the question, Jay. If not, just ask again. And David just texted me and asked me to keep looking at the at the chat window, so I'll try doing that. All right. So here's how you actually map to other, map NIST to other regulations. So this is a completely separate lesson, but I'll get you the process. So you want to start with your primary legislation that you're trying to comply with. And what I mean by that is, where is your home? Are you in a hospital? Are you inside of a government environment? What is the primary set of regulation that you're trying to comply with? We're going to assume that it's FISMA, and then you need to understand the intent and strategy behind it. And, that may mean, okay, we're a government environment, but sometimes we'll get PCI information, or, because we have credit card transactions, or we also, host this one customer that has HIPAA data. But, we would also like to host other people inside of this environment. So You need to understand the intent and strategy, what the business is what direction they're heading. They could say, well, we don't really want to go FISMA. We just want to stay in HIPAA world. So once you understand that, you need to talk to the business guys to help you understand what markets they're going after, what markets they're serving. Then you can select a controls framework. I recommend starting with a primary control framework that was built for that regulation, and that was 2 slides back, or yeah, this last slide. So if you're doing HIPAA, you can start with HITRUST if you choose to. You can, if you're FISMA, of course, NIST is out there where you can simply go to ISO. So start with a primary control set, and then you want to map your secondary legislation to your primary control set. You don't want to map another framework to another framework. I definitely stay away from that because you end up with too much work. So you take your secondary legislation, let's say it's HIPAA, you would look at all the Code of Federal Regulation and you would say, okay, where does this map to NIST? And then the delta between your control set and the secondary legislation, that's additional work. So that's the process that I normally go through. That's the process I normally go to. And when I first started this, here's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to, so I wouldn't have to do it again. I just wanted to map everything. So I can just do this work one time and have to reuse it. What I realized is that I would map it all, but then when I actually get to it, nobody would want to do the work. So that was a foolish mistake on my part. But that's just that's just an error that I see over and over. If you get audited, most auditors, they don't have knowledge of all the regulations. Neither do I, but most auditors, they'll just scope it to one domain. And that might be, okay, we're just coming in to do an HIPAA audit. We're just coming in to do a PCI audit. And so when you map everything together, the language may not jive, and your auditor will make you rework things. So just keep that in mind when you're creating an upfront heavy control set. Later on, when you get audited or you need to, there's just a lot of rework. And that's really what the Unified Compliance Framework is. It harmonizes everything. It gives a new legal language to make sure, when we say vulnerability, it really means a vulnerability. It doesn't mean a risk. It doesn't mean an exploit, so they harmonize the legal language. So that's a good framework if you're looking for harmonization of all of the different regulation standards and frameworks. However, it is pretty expensive. All right. And the other thing is you definitely want to work with your legal counsel. I did see that somebody's attending who has a JD. So you definitely want to work with a legal counsel because you might do a word match, but the intent may not be there. So, and what I mean by that is Sarbanes-Oxley, the intent of that is integrity in financial reporting, right? And then HIPAA is privacy of healthcare data. Different intents, you might have the same action, but the language needs to speak that intent as well. So you definitely want to get advice from your legal counsel on how to do mapping correctly if they are well versed in these sorts of regulations. So besides the UCF and HITRUST, you can find mappings out there. If you shoot me an email, they're out there on Google, but I don't consider them approved because I've created some. It doesn't mean that somebody approves them and says this is it. And that's why when auditors come in, sometimes they will not, they will say, okay, this doesn't match this regulation. These are the approved mappings that are out there provided by NIST. ISO 27000, it's not 100% match. You can actually see that on the note. It says an asterisk indicates control does not fully satisfy the intent of NIST control. And then common criteria. So these are the only 2 approved mappings that I know that's out there that are publicly available. There's many out there that are developed by super smart people. You can use those. You can email me if you needed those. However, I believe NIST will continue to provide these mappings in their revision 5, perhaps on other standards as well. So don't pay for it if it's for free. All right, so this is the categorization process. I'm going to go over a general process. I think you guys know what it is, but I'm going to go over it, and then I'm going to talk about the differences when you get into a defense environment versus a national security environment versus commercial. So this is just a baseline general environment. So first thing you want to do is you want to document your system boundary, your scope, diagrams, and description. I'll show you examples of what that looks like, because that can be very confusing for many people. It was certainly confusing for me. Once you document and you understand what you're actually accrediting, what is the scope, and that scope could be something huge like a data center down to something very small like just a service or just a software. Once you document that, you want to define the data type or information type running through that system. Is it healthcare? Is it is it engineering data? Is it technical data? And then if you're in the federal environment, you have to use, or you should use, the NIST 860 Volume 2, which aligns all of these information types with what they call Federal Information Architecture. And then they basically tell you what each type of information, what value, what impact does it have if we lose the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of that information. They tell you what the impact is to the government, to the federal government, due to loss of that sort of information. And then you want to come up with your impact values. We'll go over something called the high water mark concept. And impact values, these are very sometimes difficult to determine especially for a CNSSI system or a national security system. These can differ. But everything that you do, no matter what it is, adjustments or changing of values, let's say you selected, oh, this is high, but I think it's a medium, whatever the rationale is, it must be documented and supported in your system security policy. And then once you establish the values for individual data types based on impact, then you can drive your system impact, your overall, okay, is this system considered a medium impact, low impact? Only then you can do that. And at that time, you can again make adjustments. So if you came up with high and you really believe it's medium, you can document your rationale inside of SSP and make those adjustments. And then you move to step 2, which is tailoring of your baseline. So at this point, I actually want to show you guys how I explained this through our tool set we developed called Triumph, and we visualize this information. So let me see if I can do a window share and just show that to you guys. You guys see it now? Yeah. All right. So let me review that. Sorry about that. So what we're trying to do is in this categorization phase, in a NIST control framework, there are families, and underneath the families there are controls, and then there are subcontrols. So underneath the subcontrols, or underneath each family, the controls will be highlighted. You can look at them, what they are, and there's total again 900, and each control as well as a control enhancement, which is underneath the control itself. These are attached to a baseline. Either they're part of a low baseline, a moderate, or a high baseline, and the enhancement themselves are exact same thing. So all we're trying to do at this stage is figure out, is my system a high, moderate, or a low? And then when I press the button, it actually tells me, because we've already written and built the logic to do this. So if we were to expand out everything, let me see, where did it go? All right, I've zoomed out too much. All right. So if we were to expand out everything, it would actually show us let's see, yep. What is high, what is medium, what is low. And that's all we're trying to do at this stage. And this decision is based on the type of data that you have and discussions with your CISO or your authorization official or your SCA. These decisions are actually made above us, but many times they don't understand and they'll ask security managers, ISSOs consultation on well, you know, what is it? What's the process to determine it? What do you think it is? That sort of thing. So that's what we're trying to do visually. Now, after you've gone through this process, somebody asked me, all right, I've selected low, even if it's 50 controls. How do I, you know, how do I know which ones to do first, right? So what NIST provides us is with a priority, right? And the priorities go from P1 to, I believe, P5. And in my opinion, they don't really help much because, see, several things can have P1, right? And several things can have P2. So you're at, you know, you end up at the same place where, you know, you have too many things you got to do at the same time. So here's kind of what my thought is and what we've developed. What we did is we took a look at all the controls and we said, all right, all these controls in different families. Normally, when you're working within a workflow system or a spreadsheet, you go through all your access controls. Then you go through the next family and so on and so forth. The reality is, when you're talking about access control, it might impact several other controls. So it may make sense to group them differently, right? So that's what this analysis shows. When you actually are, let's say, hovering over access control enforcement management, you know, it shows you all the different controls that it impacts. So the green means it's referring to it. Red means something is referring back to that control. So AC3 is referring to SI4. And then when we go to SI4, it's actually referring back to it. So we did this inside of our software just to visualize and simplify information, large amounts of data. And right now, all I'm showing you is the controls themselves, no enhancements. When we actually look at the enhancement relations, it's so huge that you can't even tell. You know, it's too much. It's like 900 plus controls. So the smart way to do this sometimes, and we do this inside of a manual or inside of a spreadsheet or even a government GRC system called EMAS, we will finish a control and then we'll go to a related control manually. We'll say, okay, I just answered this control about access and information. I need to go talk about it in another control too. So let me go back to the screen and let me go answer that question right now. So we believe to create efficiencies, we can make groupings where all the wires are right here. This should be a group. This should be a group, or you can group them according to relationship. And the software we kind of developed, it helps with the efficiencies because this becomes a paperwork exercise. So if it's a paperwork exercise, we want to be very efficient. So whoever asks, how do you prioritize? This is truly how you would want to prioritize, is based on, you know, when you're answering one control, how does it apply to many controls within the same boundary? We've done a good job of doing that with what they call a common control provider. But when we're working individual controls, we still have a lot of inefficiencies. All right, so let me go back to my presentation. Okay, yeah, you use, yeah, I've used that tool set before, and personally, I'm not a fan of it, just because, yeah, I've used it, and it's not user friendly. So when I built this thing, when I built Triumph, I thought, okay, you know, I am the workhorse. I'm doing this work all day. Let me see. Is there a way I can make my work go faster? Is there a way I can apply, you know, one logic to many controls, not at an organizational level where, you know, human resource applies to everything? So I, you know, built it from an empathetic standpoint of an information security officer. Let's see, can you make it to where when you answer one control? Yes, that's exactly what I did. So there's a concept called common control, right? When you have your common control provider, let's just pick an example. If you're in the commercial world, the way you would do hiring, you put everything through the HR department, and if you're going to make any information security related adjustments like background checks, it's going to happen in the HR department. So HR department would answer that control, and then every time it would apply that same control to all of your systems that are underneath it, all of the business units that are using that same HR control. So that's the intent. Yeah, it's not user friendly at all. What I've done is I've taken a lot of lessons I've learned. I've developed a couple of different GRC solutions and inside out about and several other systems. And I said, you know what, this ain't cutting it for the guys in the field. I just built my own tool set, and actually posted a link out there on LinkedIn. I got several people trying it out and testing it for us, and then a few customers as well who have signed on to help them go through this faster. All right, so we got about 10 minutes, so let me see if I can push through this. All right, so your baseline is established at that step. Let's see. All right. System boundary. If you're in the government environment, you probably understand what this means, but it can be when NIST says a system, it can really mean anything you want it to mean. A one computer, one software, a huge data center, or numerous amounts of networks, an enclave, anything can be a system. You want to define that boundary for your authorization official or for your SCOB. You want to put a red line around it, green line around it. I took these graphics offline. The one on the left, system boundary with the green, that's actually from the FEDRAMP website, I believe. So again, you see several computers in there, and one on the right, you just see, software, software architecture, how it works, and the hardware may or may not be included. But you want to document all of that. That's what that really means, boundary, scope, and you want to describe it in every way possible, where the connections are going in and out. So once you understand what your boundary is, only then you can ask the question, inside of my boundary, what type of information do I have? Do I have engineering data? Do I have privacy data, technical data, whatever it is? These are other types of information. You list them out in just a chart just like this. And then if you're in a federal environment, you want to actually look at this publication, 860 volume 2, and you want to look at what type of government data you have, and it'll tell you what type of impact, and you just want to carry that over. So I copy pasted this out of the guidance, and we selected, what was it, corrective action, and it tells us low, low, low. So I just carried that over. Again, at any time you can make adjustments. If you feel like something should be a moderate, there are, like in program monitoring, it says low, but then there's a footnote. So depending on what it says in that footnote, you could be a moderate. You can make adjustments documented inside of your SSP. And what does these mean, right? What does low, moderate, high? What does that even really mean? Here are the definitions. Easy way to memorize this or know this is low is, limited adverse effect, serious adverse effect for moderate, and severe or catastrophic. Now, these are really good words. I've seen them used on all types of military, alerts, different cons, different conditions that we're in, but they don't really provide any clarity. So what I like to say is, you have to talk to the business unit. Sometimes, now this is a reality thing, the system itself, because of the data it carries, it's actually low. However, the impact, right? When we talk about impact, they can talk about, well, we'll lose our funding, or we'll, because it's connected to other system, it can have a moderate impact, or vice versa. So these are good words to know, but really to truly understand it, you got to understand the business impact. Are we going to lose funding to a system that's providing resources to a soldier out in the field? And although the information is very limited, just like maybe a GPS location, and again, I'm just making it up, it seems low from our perspective, but when you talk to the business unit, they could say, if they lose this capability, it could really hurt somebody, and it becomes a moderate system. So that's the sort of discussion you got to have with your business units to understand what it is, and that's why there are adjustments. And good questions to ask. What happens if we lost this information? What type of dollar impact? Can we even put a number on that if we're in a commercial center? If you're a FEDRAMP, a lot of times it gets told to you, hey, you're a moderate system, so that's the only choice you get. But if you understand the business reason behind why you've been categorized a certain way, you can have more fun in step 2. You can tailor things up or down because now you understand the why behind it. So let's go through something called a high water mark, or how do you determine impact for your entire system. So let's say your engineering data, you have a conversation, if you lost it, if you disclosure, the impact is high. If somebody changes it, it's okay, it's moderate. And availability, we're in the military, it's hurry up and wait. We're used to that, it's okay. You go through the same thing for your moderate or your privacy data, technical data, other types of information. You've been told what it is for the federal information. And then the next thing that you would do is make any adjustments. So this was high. What if you say, all right, we really said it was high, but after talking to the business, we believe that it's not high, it's a moderate. When you make that adjustment, make sure you document that inside of your system security plan. If you do not do that, and especially for information type that's defined out of the NIST document, your auditor will question you. They'll say, okay, you got corrective action and it says medium in there, moderate in there. Why do you have it on low? There's no rationale for it. So you want to document everything. And then again, that's what that is. The next thing you want to do is figure out what is the overall system categorization. So really easy to do. You take whatever the highest value is per information type. So engineering, we got moderate, moderate, low. So it's moderate. Same thing for that, moderate, moderate, low. It's moderate. And then low for all three. And then at this stage, again, you can make adjustments. You can make adjustments at this stage as well. And remove, if you had a high, remove that down to moderate. Just be sure to document it. And then the overall system impact is derived from the highest value inside of the combined values. So overall system impact is moderate because engineering and privacy data is moderate. And of course, that trumps the other three. That establishes your baseline. That'll give you, 200, or I would say 150 to 300 control. That's the range on high, medium, and low. It'll give you that. Then you can move on to step 2 to make adjustments if you're really in between a moderate and a high, or if you want to apply what they call overlays for different types of systems, you can make adjustments at that time in step 2. All right, so just a quick recap. System boundary, it's a vague definition, but you really want to be clear on what you're certifying. Is it a data center? So when you're answering controls, you can say applicable or not in an environment, not applicable. Here's a reason. Define information types, figure out the values, and figure out the high water mark for each value. And then you figure out the high water mark for the system itself. Document everything. So that's what that is. Now we'll quickly go over national security system, the difference. So when you're working for a 3-letter agency like NRO, NGA, systems are intermingled. Sometimes they belong to the DoD, sometimes they belong to the Defense Intelligence Agency. How they categorize it, they used to have something called level of concern. Now they're able to categorize them by impact. So if you're Amazon, if you get a denial of services attack and everything is shut down for an hour, you can lose millions of dollars. But if the government is shut down, government system is shut down for an hour, that might be okay for certain types of systems, especially if it's a system that we're building our next generation technology, right? So confidentiality and integrity is the most important thing in these types of systems, and they want to be able to pick. So what you have here is, you know, each impact value for each concern. For confidentiality, you know, what is it a low impact, medium impact, integrity, availability, and this is what I meant by that. The selection process of controls is very flexible. However, once you select it, it's prescriptive. And there are sub variations on how you do step 2, and it all depends on the agencies because the authorization officials are different. So that's all I'm going to say about this, because when I looked at everybody's background, I don't think anybody was working these systems. All right, Jay, you are welcome. This will be available, so thank you very much for attending. And then commercial method, somebody asked me about that. The commercial method is very flexible. Really, all it is that when you're making adjustments, you don't have to document. And the FEDRAMP environment does not include commercial. Okay, so you can attach it to HIPAA. So, for example, HITRUST, you know, they'll only go up to a moderate profile. They won't even go up to a high profile. You know, you don't need crazy rationale. Again, if you're trying to measure lives, how many lives are you gonna save by categorizing this high? It's different than saying, okay, this is gonna save X amount of dollars, right? So sometimes you may not even know the rationale. And then the other thing is, if you're on the commercial side, usually you're up to the latest standards. So so that's the main difference. The process works the same, but the interpretation is highly flexible. And right now there is no commercial tool, and that's why we've developed Triumph to really do this. Everybody is doing it inside of spreadsheets. All right, so we are at the end. Here's what we learned. We learned about RMF, the 5-step process. How do we map it to different regulations? We went through a general categorization process, and then we also learned about importance of documenting any adjustments. And then we finally looked at the visualization to describe what we're trying to do fundamentally. And then we, you know, on a high level, talked about these 3 types of systems. So that's all I could fit into this webinar, guys. There's a lot more information I could present on, but feel free to contact me. If there's something, like if you want to learn about national security system categorization, that's a 3-hour lesson. We could dive deep into that. So what questions do you have?